Welcome, everybody, to the Deconstructor of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Mishka Katkoff, and today my guest is Tom Wijman, lead game analyst from Newzoo'a, who's been at Newzoo'a for over 6 years. And Tom, you're behind these magnificent report. One came out last week. Can you please introduce yourself a little bit more, other than that you're from Holland and you're probably really, really tall?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for the intro. Yeah. Good day, everyone. 6'3".
Nice.
To be exact. So I am really tall, just as my fellow countrymen. So my name is Tom. I've been I work at Newzoo'a. Been the lead games analyst over at Newzoo'a for the past 6 years. And for all of those 6 years, I am the lead author and analyst behind our Global Games Market Report, which I assume many of the listeners are familiar with. I hope.
I'd say all.
I'd say all. Yeah. Hopefully, that's what I like to tell myself. Yeah. But maybe there's someone out there. If you haven't read it yet, you can. It's free to download.
You have huge impact on the industry with your reports. Everybody reads them. They're in pretty much all the presentations with executives, with founders, with venture capitalists, with bankers, with anybody who's after or giving money is using your reports. But can you a little bit open up what else Newzoo'a does except these widely accepted reports?
Right. So the reports we do is one thing. We're a specialized games market intelligence firm, and we do 3 pillars of what we do, basically business units. We have our consumer research study, which is what we've done the longest, actually, not the reports, interestingly enough. So we do consumer research about gaming, game behavior, preferences, motivation in 37 countries every year. Then we've more recently started a tracking platform around PC and console engagement and revenue data. So we track all the common metrics: MAU, DAU, retention, overlap, churn, as well as revenues for 2 countries right now. We're hoping to expand that. So we've been doing that since 2020, and it's been exciting to see that grow. And then the third thing we do, and that's what we're here to talk about today, is market sizing and forecasts for the global games market.
And you do consulting as well, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's a fourth one.
Yeah. So basically, the way that works is whenever one of our products, actually there's 2 ways that works. Whenever one of our products doesn't quite fit what a client needs, we will always talk about whether we have a custom or a consulting solution that might answer that specific question. But what's also really exciting is because, as you said, our reports are widely read. We make quite an impact on the market. Firms approach us, both endemic, non-endemic firms, approach us for our expertise in the market. And that leads us to some very exciting consulting projects, and we're very open to do those as well.
Nice. And what does an endemic mean before we jump into endemic and non-endemic?
This is maybe jargon from our company that I'm saying. When we talk about endemic, we're basically talking about game developer or publisher.
Oh, got it.
Or maybe a platform that's specifically for gaming. But then as gaming has grown over the past years, we've seen our client base shift. The majority of clients that we work with still are game developers or the publishers. But more and more, that's also spreading to brands, consumer brands that are coming in. Of course, from the finance industry, we get a lot of interest. Automotive, foods. It's our clients have really diversified over the last 5 years, and that's exciting.
Yeah,
I guess
it is exciting. It is cool. But what's even more exciting right now is the global gaming market trends. So you've spent probably how long did it take you to get this report done?
Building the actual report is about a process of 2 months.
Okay.
I'd say maybe 3 months if you include around. It's the way we work them up right around when all the full year results from companies, because that's a very important input from us for us, which is around April is when we get China as well. They typically a bit later when they release the reports. That's when we start. But first we start with crunching the numbers, getting a model right, and then building a report would say I'd take another 6 weeks. So we start around April, and then our first launch is June, July.
So last 6 weeks, or even longer, you've been heads down on this yearly content cadence of yours. And can you talk a little bit about the three big ones: mobile, console, and PC? Like, I mean, you can talk about the web as well. That's maybe a part of it. But I'd be really curious too. Like, what's the high level view, and what are the kind of key takeaways from the global like gaming market trends?
Of course. So the highest level view, I guess, is the good news is we're returning to growth. Last year was a decline in the revenues for the market, the first time that we've reported on it, at least, and we've done this since 2012. But given what happened the 2 years before, I hope most people weren't shocked that there was a bit of a correction last year. But this year we're returning to growth. Interestingly, and the first one to point out, I guess, is that the growth this year really is driven by console gaming. Well, we've all seen the amount of games that are coming out this year, and there's more coming. Starfield's just around the corner. Zelda, Hogwarts Legacy, Resident Evil. There's been so many games, also games that have been delayed from the past 2 years, and all of that is coming together this year, where it's also a year where finally you're able to purchase a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series in stores again, which was also a problem that was sort of limiting the growth potential of console in the past 2 years. So all of that is sort of coming together in a perfect situation for console growth, and that's really what is driving growth this year.
Is it so that the console wasn't, like, when we compare the previous years, is the growth driven by the fact, and I don't know if this is a fact, that there's so many games launching that, and you can actually get your hands on PS5, whereas in previous years there were delays, whether they are in supply chain delays that didn't allow you to purchase the device, or just delays in development, where a lot of these games, like you mentioned, Hogwarts, Zelda, and all the other ones, weren't just available. I mean, they were delayed.
It really is both. Yeah, the fact that it was more difficult to purchase a new console in the past years, and then the fact that many of those titles that were supposed to be selling these consoles, because that's ultimately what people upgrade for, to play these new titles, were also, due to development delays, launched this year and maybe not 2022, or even in some cases 2021. So it's the combination of those two factors that really drives console up this year.
Yeah. And was there a lot of, like, when you did the study, were there a lot of development delays, or compared to previous years?
Yes, but it's not so much about the quantity of delays, but it's really about the quality or the impact of the games that were delayed. So we're really talking about those you mentioned, in addition, Final Fantasy 16. Like, these are games and franchises, or Hogwarts was new, but in the Harry Potter franchise, which are selling billions. Like, literally, not in revenue. So that does make a large difference.
Got it. And those two so impacted both console and PC. So the delays in games and delays in devices.
More so console than PC. PC a little bit, but PC much more so than console is a live service market, where majority of revenue comes from existing games that have been out for, in some cases, 5-10 years. Like, we still see Counter-Strike in the top 10 game by revenue every month, or top 20 sometimes, and that game has been around for more than a decade. Valorant, Fortnite, these big live service titles that are really driving PC revenue. And there's a market for premium games on PC as well, but for the most part, it is console where the most of those sales are, and then there's a segment of PC as well.
Do you think that there's like, in your studies, do you see the trend of console wanting what the PC has? Meaning, like, it would be great to have a Counter-Strike, a League of Legends, a Valorant, or a Fortnite, basically a game that you can just that you run, and you don't have to ship constantly a new version every year or every second year like you have to do with Call of Duties and the FIFAs of the world. Is that sort of a games as a service trend visible in your report?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the first trends that we highlight as well in the report is this development push for live services on console. And they're there, but they haven't quite made the impact. But when you see the strategy of a Sony and a Microsoft and the big guys on console, it's going in that direction. And it's what it looks to be, at least from the outside, is that they're going to try and do both. So you have these very big franchises on console that, Assassin's Creed, Last of Us, Horizon, that they're now games in development that are supposed to be these live services or that have a multiplayer element that have this staying power. And on top of that, you get your cadence of standalone releases within the franchise that really bring in this revenue. But then in the time between those, you have this game that people can keep playing, keep engaging with, and you keep pushing out content for.
I mean, that sounds all dandy and then good, but when you kind of zoom out and start looking at the console market as a whole, a couple of questions. First of all, they keep pushing subscription services. So like you have a subscription and now you have a games as a service. Those two are contradicting, in my opinion. Then I don't know what's happening with the player base. Is the player base growing or not? Because not only you have three business models. You have paid games, you have subscription, and now you're attempting to do games as service. And then you have a set player base. And of course, the player base is much smaller due to the entry cost and the requirements to be a console player versus, for example, a mobile player. I don't know how it compares to PC. Like, what is this all leading towards? It sounds like the market is very like going into different directions, and it feels like if you go to multiple directions at the same time, you'll get nowhere.
Exactly. and I actually I love that you brought this up, because this is a real risk. So to unpack some of that, I think you hit a good point when you said the player base isn't growing as fast, and we're projecting it not to grow as fast as it has in the past 5 to 10 years. And to how I see it, at least, that is part of what is driving this trend. These companies, they see that projection, or they see other projections about the player base. They see it in their own numbers probably, and then they're like, "Oh, well, if we're not going to get as many new players, then we need to keep these growth rates that we have. We need to do better with the players we have. How do we do that? We look at mobile, we look at PC. Let's try live services." But you're right, because they're also trying subscriptions, and subscription is a bit of a we're not as bullish on subscriptions as we might have been in the past.
How come? How come?
Well, first of all, because the reports confirm that in some cases the numbers have missed targets, and the user base for subscriptions haven't quite matched the projections that were internal. You also see it in the content that is coming to these subscriptions. It's not coming at the same pace as it might have in the past. And for the same reason, we see if you're pushing live services, you're pushing these premium games, but you're also trying to do the subscriptions. Like at some point, one of these has to give. There's a limit to there is a limit to how much people can spend on games, but I think the first limit that we're going to reach is just the time that people have to play. And particularly when you go for these engagement-based models, which is a live service where you prioritize engagement over revenue, you put engagement first. At that point, you're actively pushing two completely different ideas. So it's a very, very real risk, I would say, that this market, we're reaching saturation in terms of the amount of playtime people have and where they can put that.
Yeah, and also the paid games, so the big blockbuster ones, the Uncharted, the God of War, the Microsoft game, Star.
Starfield.
I don't know if that's paid or not, but it feels like probably both. Like
that's the interesting part, right? It's paid. It's definitely paid, but it's also going to be on Game Pass.
Of course it is.
Of course it has to be,
and it will have microtransactions as well. I don't know, but
I actually don't know.
But it's like Diablo
at some
type
point.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Probably not on launch, and then a month after, all of a sudden, hey, look, guys, you can purchase more. No, but that's exactly the thing, right? Because Starfield's now coming to Game Pass, and it is a paid game, and I don't know how that's. And a lot of people are going to play it.
Yeah, and these paid games are not only, some of them are true blockbuster hits, but they're also much bigger than in the previous generation. So there's more time put in, the quality is better, but there's more time where, that they allow you to play that game. So it's just like, sounds crazy what's happening with console. They're going in all directions at once.
Yeah. So far, though, at least this year, it is leading to growth. Like, I don't want to sound like it's a bad outlook. It's not at all. And even these paid games, these premium games, like they're breaking records in terms of sale. Like the install base for console is bigger than it's ever been. So it's definitely a market that is set for growth. But at the same time, I think we can question like all of these ideas that are happening at the same time, and some of them are not going to work. But that's also natural, I guess.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting point. And when a console game doesn't work, that's an expensive miss, because at the point, that's a very expensive miss.
Very much so.
Yeah, with all the marketing,
they only come every few years. You're in a franchise, and that's broadening. Like it's 5-6 years between a release is not even that crazy at this point.
And does PC have similar types of problems? I mean, when I think about PC, I think about Steam, I think about Epic Store.
Less so, because premium is just not as much of a market on PC as it is on console, and definitely not the blockbuster premium style that console is known for. So there's more games. A lot of PC revenue is also carried by AA and even indie games. I think because the amount of titles that are launched, the amount of titles that are purchased on platforms like Steam, EGS, are more diversified. That means that what we were talking about, the console, is less of a risk. At the same time, the concentration of revenues on PC is very much in those top performing live service titles as well. But there's no reason to assume why they would all of a sudden start declining, because they have been at the top for so long. And there are things that are carrying. When it comes to PC, though, maybe let's briefly touch upon web browser. Browser, to be fair, is a segment that's been in decline for so many. Like it's hanging on by a thread.
Would you call it mice nuts at this point?
Yeah. Well, it's still, there's still somewhat of a market, but most of that is China. Like if you see our number in the report and you see, that's bigger than I would thought, then realize that probably half of that browser market right now is China.
Yeah.
And a significant chunk in South Korea, and then the rest is spread all over the rest of the world. Interestingly, going back a few years, but there was a short browser resurgence during COVID when it was a very low barrier to entry type of game. And we had 1 year where browser revenues were more or less flat year on year. And after that, it went decline again. But that is, in terms of PC, it's mice nuts, as you put it. And the rest of the market is just, download games.
Yeah. One more thing about console and PC. So is there a trend of big console games being also like these paid games or paid plus microtransaction games being launched on PC as well? Like, are console games also trying to, because the user base is what it is, they're trying 5 different business models at the same time, but are they also pushing on PC to kind of get a little bit of a new players from there as well?
Well, there's 2 things at play here, I would say. One of the things is that there is an ongoing trend about being cross-platform. Just cross-platform is a bit of a hype term, but the way I put it, you want to be on the platform that your players are. So if your player is at that point on a PC, or on a complementary device that runs like a PC, you want your game to be there at that time as well. So that's part of it. It's also, like we just discussed, we're stretching the console player base, at least in the Western markets. So you want to tap into the PC audience. But I will say that trend this year or the past 12 months somewhat slowed down, because I think a lot of developers, publishers have realized that it is not so easy to port your game to PC and have it work. And there were quite a few disappointing failures, or failures sounds hard, but like games that just didn't optimize well for PC, that didn't run as well, and that got quite a bit of negative feedback. And we see that's somewhat cooled down the we've got to get all our games on PC as well appetite. Optimize for console first for many of these console first games, get an audience there, have that work, do your seasonal content, your microtransactions, etc. If all of that works and you've sort of maxed out there, maybe then look at what the PC audience is. But if you're trying to do all of these things at the same time, then the very real risk is that the port doesn't work. That might upset your player base there.
Yeah, hits the Metascore and everything, and brings a bad sentiment, and people start associating that with the console version and all that jazz. I'm going to focus actually on console mostly, because it seems like they are the ones that are growing, and they are the ones that are making most of the moves, whether it's the business models or whether it is expansion to other platforms. So kind of going back to these console developers that are experiencing this tremendous growth right now, what is going on with handheld devices? Because there was the Steam Deck, then there was Nintendo is, of course, they announced the new device, and they seems to be doing great with the subpar device that they have in terms of just specifications. Like, I have it; it's like worse than my phone, like 5 times worse than my phone. And PlayStation just released a new handheld device, which is like a different take on everything. What's going on with the handheld market? Is it growing? Is it stable? Is it declining? Why are these companies going after handheld devices?
There's a lot to unpack there. It's certainly a very interesting market to keep a look at. The way we see handheld for the most, and I think there's a semantics argument we can have here about whether Steam Deck is a console or a PC. But the way we classify these, and then I'm leaving Switch out for the second, but they're really complementary devices. Looking at Steam Deck, and then Asus ROG Ally, there's a Logitech thing that tried to do cloud, but I think we'll get to that at some point.
Let's leave it towards the end.
Let's leave that for now.
I know Chris is listening to this, so he will burn a fuse if we don't start talking about cloud.
He's grabbing his desk now. Here we go. Let's leave that. And then indeed the PlayStation device that is again going a different route. But we classify most of these as what you call complementary devices. And again, they're in that train of thought of, I want my game or I want my platform to be where my players are at the time. And I think if you're a PC gamer, if you have a large library on Steam or whatever is PC platform, one of the frustrations that you might run into as a player is that if you're on the move, if you're on a flight or you're on commuting to work, then you can't play these games. If you're somewhere else, you're on vacation, you're in a hotel, you can't play these games. And the Steam Deck, the Ally, they fixed that. You can take these. I have a Steam Deck. I haven't played and bought as many PC games in years since I got that.
Oh, wow.
So I have a 1.5 hour commute to office. I don't go every day, but I find myself excited to commute to the office because it means, I'm a parent as well. So gaming time is very limited, but that's 3 hours of uninterrupted gaming time that's guaranteed on that day. So for me, anecdotally, it works great. Like, it's the perfect device. And actually, I had a Switch too, but I never played it because I didn't grow up with Nintendo. So I don't have that nostalgia factor. And I switched it for a Steam Deck. But it is really, like, especially these devices, the value add the unique selling point of it is if you already have built up that library of games on PC. If you're already a PC gamer, because if you're not, I don't think that you're gonna buy that. Maybe at some point in a few years from now, when these devices get even better, like we get a Steam Deck V2, and they're really a replacement for a gaming PC. I would say right now, though, they're additive, complementary. And that's also when we look at revenues and in terms of players, these devices aren't necessarily growing the PC player base. And I wouldn't even say that these games are bringing in much additional revenues for the segment, but it is one of the trends that sustains the PC market.
And you're able to track the additive sale through these handheld devices, or because sometimes when I look at the graph that shows handheld devices, and in the latest Data AI and IDC report actually showed a decline in it. I'm just wondering, are they showing the value of the market as the device sales, or are they showing the additive value that these devices generate by players actually buying more games?
I can't really speak to their methodology because I don't have that insight, but my best guess would be that it's the additive value of selling games.
Got it.
I think IDC in the past has always had a different category for when it came to hardware sales.
Got it.
And we would do the same. We would look at, like, we would be able to track what devices people use to play.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we could get some of this info.
Perfect. So we got console, PC, especially like having this additive sale. We have console, Microsoft and Sony having devices that allow you to play their games on handheld devices. Sony has a proprietary device, and then Microsoft, I think, is just offering the cloud Xbox.
It's the ability to stream these games to your mobile phone.
Got it.
But it's roughly like it's a different. I would say, I don't know how the experience compares, but I would say the idea of this being a device that will help you to take your console or PC games on the go.
Got it.
And whether you do that through streaming or whether you do that through local remote play, which is what I think the Sony PlayStation Portal, I think it's called, will work off, or whether it's really with a dedicated your native handheld gaming device such as Steam Deck or ROG Ally. The idea is just to bring your existing library and take it with you on the go.
Perfect. So just increasing engagement as we talked about with other elements. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about mobile. We can start off with just the mobile market as a whole, but we also have to touch point again of these console developers really focusing on mobile. Like we've seen Microsoft making a case that the whole acquisition of Activision is really about mobile. Like that's a very bold statement, but that's kind of shows the sentiment, whether that is correct or not. Well, we have to take it as correct since it's an official company statement that mobile is very important for them. So can you talk a little bit why this is so? What's happening in mobile?
Sure. So maybe to start at the market itself, we do forecast a very small increase in mobile revenues this year, but just 0.8% year on year. And that follows a rather significant decline from last year. So we're still going to end up below the level of mobile revenues that we had 2021.
Of course.
But again, part of that I think has been discussed many times, like the removal of IDFA and everything that followed after that, fingerprinting, all these other solutions that might or might not work, or might not work as effectively. In the context of Microsoft and what console developers are seeing in this market, though, it's really audience. When we talk about player audience, mobile is a factor 2.5 over PC audience and a factor 4 almost over console audience, if not more. And it is where Interestingly enough, it's where the growth is as well, because we are, when we're talking about the global market and what is driving growth, then of course it's the major mature markets. We're talking North America, Western Europe, China, Japan, South Korea, that determine, that have a very big influence on whether the global market grows.
Mm-hmm.
So if those markets are not growing as fast as they have in the past, or maybe even declining at some point, then in the global picture you will see a decline. But if you're an individual mobile publisher or developer and you're looking like, okay, where can I capture growth? A lot of that is still in mobile, but not in these massive markets, but in the smaller region or the emerging regions, South Asia, Southeast Asia, MENA, Middle East, Northern Africa, Latin America. And if you want to grow in those markets, they're mobile first regions. The player base is going to be on mobile. The growth in revenues is on mobile. And that's not necessarily to do with, well, of course, content has to be there. But what unlocks growth in these markets is people getting access to cheaper smartphones, better internet infrastructure, adoption of local payment methods, adoption of local payment processors. And if you include if those get added to, or those get integrated into how people play games, and you all of a sudden get the ability to pay for them, that is what's driving a lot of growth. So even though in the global picture, mobile might not look like the market to focus on, if you dive a bit deeper into the data and you look at where on a market level you can still find growth, there's quite a bit of opportunity in mobile.
I find it always confusing because I analyze mobile market a lot when you kind of bundle all the mobile market together. And what I like to do personally is I always remove Japan, Korea, and China because they have such a strong influence on the overall market, but they're also extremely concentrated markets where China, you can't enter. Let's start with there. And Korea, maybe you could enter it, but
technically you can, but
technically
it's
you can't. Exactly. It's unlikely. You might, Clash of Clans, so that kind of a game might do it if you set up your own operations there. Japan, kind of same thing, but you're not going to be big in Japan. Like, let's be honest. There's nothing it doesn't matter how big of a game you have in the West or in the rest of the world. It's not going to be big in Japan. It could be okay in Japan, and even that will require significant investment. So anyways, I tend to leave those out and then start looking at the market and really start looking at the different genres and audiences. So to summarize kind of like what you said, mobile is pretty much stable. What's keeping it stable is lack of growth in key markets, those who are very matured, where players have been playing these mobile games for about a decade. They have their favorite games. They keep playing Candy Crush. They keep playing Clash of Clans. They are getting their hands on maybe the latest titles, the big ones, the MiHoYo's games, the Blizzard games, the Activision games, and then so forth. And the other thing that is keeping the revenue down is the fact that you can't hunt for whales anymore. With the restrictions coming through privacy, it's much harder to find people who pay. And through that, those key genres that we're able to have relatively small audiences but well monetizing are suffering through that. And then you're saying that the growth should be looked at geographical levels. And then this is where I have a question. So you said MENA, you said Southeast Asia. As the growth of player base in Latin America, as the growth of player base is growing, do you see also growth in spending in those regions?
Yeah, slowly. And first of all, I think you did a very good job summarizing what I just tried to explain. So, all the points you said were totally fair, and that's exactly how we look at the market. And yeah, so to answer your question, it is both, but its player growth is still growing faster than the average spend, and the average spend per player is still much lower than it is in some of these mature mobile markets. But that is partly also an opportunity, right? There is room for growth because the economics simply in these markets show that they are growing markets. Like, the economy is improving, disposable income is growing, and with that, average spend per player, or per payer rather, is growing. But not as fast as the player base. The player base still expanding faster than the average spend is going up, but both are going up, and that's why there is growth in these regions.
Yeah. And as we're talking about growth and seeking for growth, it's also important to understand the macroeconomical factors that are at play. The interest rates are up, people have less disposable income, the inflation is higher, much higher than we've accustomed to. So all these elements, of course, have an impact on the disposable income. And then we have to take into account, especially on mobile, is that, or overall in people's spending, is that there are sort of a new sinks that people will focus on rather that they didn't have, let's say, a decade or in 2008, 2009 when we had a recession. And that is, of course, all the subscription services that we're using, all the streaming platforms. Like Netflix is the last to go. Like you'd rather not spend on microtransactions in certain game, but you're going to have your Netflix because the value, the entertainment per dollar is such a dominant, compared to almost any other form of entertainment.
Yeah, that's very fair, but it's also something that we are closely keeping an eye on, because I feel like many of these questions aren't necessarily answered yet. Because, like you said, the last time we went through a recession like this, there wasn't that many subscription, but also a microtransaction itself, free to play mobile, was barely coming up, just coming up around that. Arguably, you could say that the whole free-to-play model grew because of that, because you all of a sudden had all of these entertainment at your fingertips without having to pay for it. I don't know if that's true, but that could be. It could have been a factor. And now we're looking at this situation, and there's this questions where we don't know yet. Like, are microtransactions, logically, you think, you're not required to purchase them, so maybe in times where the economic situation is not great, and you get pressure on your household income, then you drop the microtransaction spend. The other thing that could happen is that people say, well, I'm not subscribing to these 3 subscription services, or I'm not going to take a vacation now, but I might spend down and treat myself to a new character or buy a few extra lives because, well, I didn't make that major purchase. And the thing is, we don't really know yet, and we can only, I think, once in a few years look back and then learn and see, oh, this is basically how microtransactions and that whole market acts in a situation where the economics don't work. So this week spent quite a bit of time on trying to unpack this and how this may happen, but the answer we kept coming back to is like, well, part of it is just wait and see.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen some data actually from Google that shows that the correlation between growth of inflation and decrease of spending on microtransaction, and there was also subscription spending that wasn't affected by the growth of inflation. So one went down, one went up, and one stayed steady, which kind of made the hypothesis of that the subscription, whether it's your Tinder profile, again, I have no idea what Tinder is even, but I assume that it's very hard to get off with the Bumbles or whatnot, and then the Netflixes and the Disney Pluses and whatnot. Like, first, certainly some of them will go, like the ones that you use least, but it seems like some of these are such a powerful subscriptions that you're just gonna get your Spotify and that's it. It's like you're not gonna get rid of it because you need your daily dose of Joe Rogan, and that's pretty much it. So, anyways, maybe that's me. But let's move on kind of to the to kind of like 2 questions: what is working and what isn't working. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start at what is not working? Because we can start easy. We can start Web3 and just kind of hit like a home run from there and keep going.
Yeah, maybe let's do Web3 right away.
Okay,
we haven't talked about Web3 in the report this year, and I think that says all we need to say about that.
Okay. So the Web3, got it. Let's not even talk about it. How about what other things are not working that were previously maybe working, or we were kind of like teetering there? Things like VR, AR, esports.
maybe this is a difference between Newzoo'a and deconstructive. I wouldn't never. I think it's harsh to say they're not working at all, because they are working for certain people.
Of course.
But well, AR. I think we started AR. AR not working. I haven't seen any AR game be successful, and then you always get the example of or Pokemon Go, but nobody uses AR on that game. So
of course not.
No. So
we'll say not right now, right?
Not right now. That's very good.
Yes, the not right now. In 5 years, in 10 years, might be the biggest thing since sliced bread, but not right now.
Not right now. No. And then VR, it's very much a niche market. So there's an install base. Like there's millions of people have a VR device at home. They buy games on it
that they don't use.
Well, that's exactly. But that is a real issue, and we talked about this internally quite extensively. There's just I think there's a disconnect between the fantasy of what VR is and what it is actually now, and like the whole idea of going into a different world and freely exploring, like the highest amount of immersion you can get. That is what this sounds like. Maybe it sounds a bit arrogant, but that's why people think they want VR. But then the games that are actually successful are successful within that market are high action games that are, not like a fantasy world where you can freely explore, because the device doesn't actually allow you to do that. And there are things like Superhot, which is very active way of playing, and that sort of thing worked. But there's still, I think there's part of it is a disconnect between what is being made and what the device is actually for. The other thing is that it's always going to be a niche thing, just because it asks so much of you as a player.
So maybe not for games, maybe for utilities down the line. That's at least how Apple is positioning it as well.
Possibly. I mean, I think there's always going to be somewhat of an interest to play games, do VR, but it's not a major segment, and I don't see it becoming one.
Perfect. All right. And then when we're talking about what's working, what's not, it's more like, what is it true to the hype? Is it what it was expected? So if we're, based on investments that Meta has been doing in VR, is it reaping the benefits? No, it's not. How about esports? Like, esports has been there for a long time. It's been hyped. There's football team and basketball teams have all set up their esports organizations. It was like so hot a few years ago, and then COVID came, and then reality set over. Where are we right now?
Past that, for sure. Esports, again, it depends on what you would argue. Is it working? Is it working in the sense that you can pour a lot of money in and expect to get a return on your investment? Unless you're a game publisher with an active esports scene, then probably the answer is going to be no. Does esport work as a retention and engagement model for very competitive titles? Absolutely. Like, there is an audience for people to watch the best players compete versus each other. But it's a marketing channel, essentially. And if you approach it as that and not a pillar of a business that's supposed to generate revenue in itself, and I know I've read the Riot statement from a few months back where they said they were going to do just that, and maybe it works out and we turn out to be wrong. But in terms of an audience, in terms of viewership, yes, it's there. There's people that are interested in this. There's people that are watching this. But not in terms of a business where you as an outside investor will get a return on your investment.
Perfect. So got it. So it's an investment at best and a sink at worst.
Again, it depends on where you're coming from with this. But think that's all we need to say on the
All right.
topic.
All right. Let's talk about some other interesting stuff. So we talked about handheld device. Let's talk about AI. AI is the hottest thing right now.
Yeah,
Everybody's using AI. You cannot, like, even LinkedIn has AI right now. It's,
it
it's
has. Yeah,
impossible to get out of AI. I think this whole show is just done by two AI characters right now. So
I'm not actually here.
yeah, me neither. So don't hold me accountable. So what's going on with AI? Is it, is it working? Is it not working?
I would say it's working for now. Compared to some of the trends we covered just now, there's a very real use case for AI in games. And earlier in this podcast, we were talking about this increasing development time, increasing development budget, and AI absolutely already plays a role in trying to limit that, even maybe bringing it down at some point. AI is a tool that can help smaller teams bring out games faster than they are doing right now. And there's already some examples on that, like High on Life, which was launched last year, used some AI tools to generate voices, to generate background art. And that there's plenty of examples like this already. So AI is definitely working, but there are also some questions or potential issues that need to be solved, and that's around the copyright cases. Mostly, and what type of content you can use and what type of tools you can use to generate AI, and knowing what these AI tools have learned from, and that's part of where there's probably a need for regulation, or at least some kind of control or transparency. But in general sense, whether AI is doing what at least now we're hoping it will do, which is to speed up game development, then yes, I would say that is working.
Got it.
I'm staying away from the idea that AI in the future might even be incorporated into the games itself. That may happen. I don't know why it wouldn't, but that's not really the impact that we're seeing now.
So the role of AI, what's working is that it's streamlining the development, and through that helping to control and in some cases even decrease the cost of development that have been steadily rising across actually pretty much all platforms. Mobile is a little bit of a dichotomy. There's always the games that are made fast, quickly, but there's also games that are of a AAA quality these days, and AI can help there. In your report, did you touch upon the point that there's, as with AI in all industries, whether we're talking about entertainment or tech or whatnot, there's always people that are very anti-AI because they're afraid that this could take their jobs, essentially. Did you touch upon that element in your report, and what do you think is going to be the effect of it?
Yeah, we do. So in the report, we do talk about the pros and cons of AI, and one of the things that we address in there indeed is the very real risk, I would say, that AI takes part of the work out of current developers' hands, and with that, this is a very real risk. I would say that if there's a reason to be worried. I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom here, but yeah, it's how this goes. If certain tasks or certain things can get handled by AI that were handled by developers before, then loss of jobs is a very real risk, as it is in any other industry. And we can be hopeful that as AI takes over the more mundane tasks, replicating a in-game art asset 50 times in slightly different coloring or slightly different formats, that it leaves the developers to be more creative and to spend more time creating new art. But realistically, that's not always how it's going to be used.
Yeah, there's a sentiment that I'm seeing a lot where executives are sort of giving a soothing talk of like, no, this just means that we don't need to grow the organization as much. We can have who we have right now and have more efficiency, which is for sure 100% true. But nevertheless, when I'm seeing how AI is being used by startups, by startups that are developing games, they are getting very fast progress by, either not hiring people for certain tasks, especially artists, especially narrative designers and those kind of people, or just having like one person who's able, with the help of AI, produce significantly more and at a significantly faster pace. So I think what you're saying is very objective, and I think that type of a sentiment is something that executives are afraid to say, because that will lead to your art team, your narrative designer team, potentially in future engineering teams kind of being against the use of AI, because it would mean that they would maybe see the loss of colleagues if they truly embrace it.
Yes, but then you could argue, what do you have to gain by resisting?
Yeah, well, we're just by, so there's a human component to this all, and we're just looking at from the side. So we can always say, like back in the days when cars were coming in, like, why are you resisting cars? They will win eventually. Why would you have horses? It doesn't make any sense. They poop everywhere. It's like it's easy for us to say the downside, because we're not actually
we're not impacted.
Yeah, we don't have horses,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So we're looking from the side, but there's a very legit human component to this, and I think that will be something that the industry will have to cope with. But it's gonna hurt some people. I think that is unavoidable at this stage.
I'm afraid so. Yes, that it is unavoidable. That and it might be a temporary thing, where people in the studios learn to work with AI and learn to incorporate that, and in the short term, that may unfortunately affect some people. But then once we incorporate, typically, again, if you learn from all these technology advancements, usually we as humans find a way to be productive or busy elsewhere. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that I think it's unavoidable that there's at least an impact in the near term.
Well, so embrace it. Be a sort of first mover to understand what the AI does and what it doesn't, so that you can position yourself that you're not redundant, like we will be, because this podcast will be fully produced by AI.
All the reports.
We're down there, so we're down. We're going to be baristas too, so it doesn't matter. Let's talk about transmedia. That has been something in the news all the time. You got Mario that did super well. Barbie, to some extent, yes, because even though that's not a game, but there's plenty of Barbie games, and then Barbie has been then incorporated with a lot of different games, whether it's a Stumble Guys or some other ones. I don't know if that's maybe just a use of an IP to lower it, but PlayStation has been really going into transmedia. Last of Us. I think there's a GT. There's a lot of different shows coming in based on these beloved franchises. So transmedia, is it working? Is it not? What is the data saying?
The data is saying yes. So
it's
good
yes.
News. What we did for the reports, I think, is we wanted to explore a bit of a different angle, because, like you said, we've seen much in media, and all these shows and movies have been very successful, and that's kind of a showcase that the storytelling that we're doing in games is strong and very good, and it can lead to compelling stories even outside of the gaming medium. And that's very exciting. But what we try to impact for this report is, okay, but does it also work the other way around? Like, if you do a game, or if there is a show about a game or about a franchise, does that also compel people to play that again? And the answer again was yes. I mean, we're not talking double numbers of MAU or double revenue, but there is a very real, like, we looked across, I think, 27 franchises where in the past couple of years there's been some sort of media. So whether that be a TV show, and even anime, like animated shows,
like with
the
Riot
movie, exactly, and Cyberpunk as well. And like, do we see around those beats when these shows are announced? So 3 months before release, during release, and after release, like, do we actually see that gaming engagement and increases? And the answer again was yes. Like we're talking on average, like an 8 to 10% increase in MAU for all these franchises combined. And the other thing that was very interesting, because we also wanted to know, like, okay, are these players that are coming back or are these new players? And we did see like the meaningful change in the new amount of players that were coming to these franchises while these shows are running. So I think the good thing about transmedia, and that we sort of try to prove with this analysis that we've done, is that it really benefits both sides. It benefits the movie and show and like the entertainment industry because they get the content from games, but it also is beneficiary for game developers and publishers that are giving out this IP rights, or maybe doing it in-house, but they're putting their IP out there, and this is, translate into new players and higher engagement. And again, yes, on average it does.
That's good to hear. That's so we'll be probably seeing more and more transmedia happening then, because there is a proven effect, and your clients are so big that they're probably following this, and your report will encourage them to invest more into transmedia.
Yeah. Although again, here's the warning is that it doesn't always work. It wasn't always the case that it increased, and there is, a thoughtful mix between if the medium and the type of show and the audience that you're going for matches with what you're trying to do with your game, then you can see this positive effect. But if there's a disconnect, or it seems not genuine in one way or another, then it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, it's still exciting. It's still exciting for developers, for executives to be working with Hollywood, having those meetings with the Hollywood execs, meeting the actors, getting your movie out. Like all those things would be. I've never, been in those circles, but that sounds like a lot of fun. It
must be, right? Yeah. Seeing your work, your story, your ideas on the big screen, or on a
and also just going to these galas. Like, we have game development galas, but those kind of suck. We don't have like Cannes, we don't have the Venice Film Festivals. Going there, putting your like #1 suit on and just going. So that sounds amazing.
Suit. Yeah,
even worth that, even if it's like ROI zero, like it's not a cost, but at least you can go to like Cannes Film Festival or Venice, or I don't know I don't know many film festival like that or Sundance. Like any of this would be fun. So let's knock off the last one, which is of course cloud gaming.
Oh,
like where are we with cloud gaming? Working or not?
This is an interesting one, right?
It's yes or no. Like it's pretty...
cover your ears. Yes.
All right.
But it depends. When we talked about this before, you said, is cloud gaming something that lives up to the hype, lives up to the promise? It kind of depends on where you were looking at. Like if we go back to 2019, when we were at GDC, you're sitting in the main stage, Google comes up and they announce Google Stadia, and you get sucked up into, wow.
Give me Assassin's Creed on my phone. Yeah. And then you get on your phone, like, get this out of my phone.
That level of hype, if we go by that as the base case, no, probably not. That we didn't get to where we may have thought we were going there. But then on the other hand, cloud gaming is growing. We see more users, more paying users, and more being spent for these services every year. And I think one thing that is good to separate here is that there's one very high profile case where it didn't work, which we talked about, and there's another. Amazon Luna as well stepped into cloud gaming, and again, there's the idea that this is Amazon behind it, so this has to be big within no time, and it hasn't. It hasn't done that.
They also made a phone, so let's not forget that.
Yeah, exactly. So these big tech companies step into something, and then the expectation is that it grows rapidly and becomes the next big thing, and it hasn't become that. But we talk to many of the smaller on the background cloud gaming providers, whether that, they might be working with TV manufacturers, telecom providers, internet providers, OTT companies, and all of them tell us the same thing. Like, we're seeing more users coming in, they're spending more, and they're reporting growth. So, and that is even true for like an NVIDIA as well, GeForce Now. But again, there's also some, sorry, we're a research firm, so we'll always have the upside and the downside. That's how we look at things. There's realistic questions you can ask about cloud gaming and the cost side and how that's associated with. And one of the things that we're also seeing while talking to all of these companies, they may have started, or their idea may have started as a pure play cloud gaming service. So, we build up this infrastructure, we have these remote services, we put in gaming ready devices in there, and then that's how we are going to grow. But now many of that is diversified, and cloud gaming is one of the things that they do. But the amount of pure play cloud gaming services is not as many as there were right around that Stadia time, or right after that announcement of Stadia. And clouds, because these same servers that are built up are can be used to develop games while remote. You can open these up to game developers as well and have them work remote effectively, have them being able to test build while they are in different areas of the world. It unlocks some capabilities in terms of development that you wouldn't have at a home setup, because there's, hypothetically, at least, realistically no, but hypothetically, there's infinite processing power when you're using a cloud, a remote server. And yes, they're also stepping into AI a little bit, because again, with these very powerful remote devices, you can increase that processing speed, increase that learning speed by a lot. So there's some diversification happening. At the same time, we do hear that the number of users, paying users, is going up in context of the total market and some of these segments that we were talking about at the start. Then cloud gaming is very much a niche market.
Yeah. So it is working. It is growing. But compared to the size of investment, it's not there. It's not where you would expect it to be. And only time will tell whether it grows. So it's like in an early invest stage. And we're at least seeing traction, unlike a Web3 that we didn't even talk about. There was investment, there was no traction, and we're not even talking about it. So in this case, there's a lot of investments from all the top players. Some of the players have even removed themselves, like Google or Amazon.
Yep.
But when
Amazon is still active, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
They actually, for the first time, it was quiet for a long time, to the point where we were just waiting for the announcement.
Yeah.
But then they announced not too long ago, I think half a year ago maybe, that they are expanding the country. So for a long time, they were only available in the US, and now they're moving elsewhere.
Makes sense with AWS and all their infrastructure
exactly.
they have.
They have the infrastructure.
And then the Prime with the subscriptions, but yes, the clients. But and then Google is still kind of in the game up through a white label. So, or maybe not. That was not the your face said not.
No,
said not. Google's not in the game with this one. So
no, Google's just not in game with this.
Not in game. But overall, there's growth. There's tremendous amount of investments, and we'll see over the next 5 years whether the growth will outpace the investment, and there will be actually a payback. And on a conceptual level, it makes sense with the cloud gaming. Like, it just makes sense that you don't have to have hardware devices, and everything can be accessed through different screens. And I think that is the future, but it's definitely not today. It's not next year. It's not the year after that. Could it be in 5, 10? Most likely.
Yeah. And I would say also definitely within that, it's not the only future.
Yeah.
So the way we look at cloud as well is that it's another method of delivering games to players.
Yes, accessibility.
Exactly. And with that logic, then yes, there's a future.
Yeah, there's value proposition there, and especially with let's say even the supply chain issues where you can't get the newest hardware device, but through cloud, technically that would be possible in the future.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing, I know you're working with a lot of finance bros. whether they're private equity or other types of a capital, as well as publishers. What are the trends that you would suggest them to keep an eye out for? Like, what are the sort of a hot things that would stand out when you take a slide out of a Newzoo report, and that kind of almost guarantees you a check from an investor or a limited partner or any kind of money bag?
Oh, I'm not a financial advisor.
Yes, yeah.
No, I would say, so what are the things? If you are in UGC right now, that's a very good place to be.
UGC, boom.
Yeah, that's because UGC, as well as, giving these tools, creator tools to players, it is also a very good answer to going back to what we talked about in the very beginning of this podcast, console, creating all this content. Where's that coming from? Why not
Players.
crowdsource some of that? Exactly.
UGC plus AI. That's a great bet. Like, if
you put those two on your pitch deck and
boom. All right, Tom.
Back.
You are a financial advisor, so UGC plus AI, strong sell, or strong buy. What else? What else are we talking about? What else? How about if my company, like my company, I'm just an example. How about if I'm targeting MENA?
Yeah, so MENA is the market where we are forecasting the most growth this year in terms of revenue. So if you have established, or you have somewhat traction there, that's typically a good sign. Like, MENA is right around that time where the economy is improving, players are coming in, they get more opportunities, more access, and therefore especially this year, but also next year, that region is really set for strong growth.
Mm-hmm. So you can do even esports events there. There's plenty of stadiums.
Yeah.
What else? Cloud? No.
Wait and see.
Wait and see. Hold on, cloud. What are the trends would you keep an eye on? How about privacy changes? A lot of the pitches that we're seeing right now is the investors are asking the same questions. How are you going to grow? UGC is a great way, and AI is a great way to produce content. Also, in some terms, viral. MENA is a growth platform because there's a growing base. But regarding privacy, that is the number one questions that investors are asking people who are seeking funding, for example, in mobile. It's like, how are you going to grow? So what's your take on privacy?
Well, some of the things that we're seeing to get around that, and we come back to use of IP right now, licensing, game or non-game IP. But an example that recently popped up, like Scopely and Monopoly Go. Everyone knows Monopoly, so if you have that IP, then all of a sudden these targeting issues might not be so much of an issue for you anymore. So working with IP, working with franchises, having that recognizability, trying different approaches to marketing, maybe more traditional forms of game marketing that all of a sudden become viable again, because user targeting is just not as effective. So if you kind of try and diversify how you want to reach your audience, and you have a good story about why your game, whether that be franchise, whether that be marketing strategy, might do well.
So if I would put in IP plus broad appeal games plus brand marketing plus influencers, you'd give a thumbs up?
Well, maybe, a bit more detail about how.
Yeah, but those are the columns.
Let's just say those are some of the strategies that we've observed mobile game developers that have managed to be successful in the past years employ. So, yeah.
And what are the other trends? Should we be looking at how the subscription model evolves? Should we be looking at games as a service model evolving? What are the other trends that we should be looking at to react towards?
I think all of those are viable bets as well. Like live services, we talked about some of the potential issues or bottlenecks that we're facing, but the situation right now is that it's still a very good bet, and that's probably why we see so much investment going towards that. Also from like the very top publishers in terms of revenue, in terms of player base. But realize that if you're going for a live service, you're getting into a market that's more and more constricting, and there is, going to be very, very big players and franchises entering that market as well. So, just be mindful of what you're getting into. And even now, when we see all these games that are being announced, like Summer Game Fest many of these are not going to be as successful as they hope they will be, and that's just an inevitability because of the model that they employ.
Yeah.
So overall, yes, the live services markets, or rather, microtransactions, downloadable content, that is going to grow. But because the competition is increasing and it's more of a zero-sum market where you're all asking for time, and that's a limited resource. Yeah. There's no guarantee that you, as an live service developer, are going to be successful if you chase that trend.
True, but having my finance bro hat on, I would naturally be focusing on the companies that provides tools for the content developers to succeed in games as a service, and the tool providers are not as hurt whether that game succeeds or not, because they have several other companies that they're working with and helping them to succeed. So there's many ways to read these trends, and there's many players in an industry other than just pure content creators. So that's fair. That's very important to understand, because in terms of startups, there's other startups than just the game studios. Anything else, Tom?
I think we covered it.
Well, thank you so much, Tom Wijman. As always, a must-read report. We'll have link. You don't even link in description. If you haven't read it, go to Newzoo'a. You can download the report there. It is a very interesting one. I read it, back to back. A lot of insights, and really helps because a lot of our audience is very mobile focused. It helps us to zoom out and look at the industry as a whole and understands, for example, what are these console players doing and why, what could be the future, what are the elements that financial institutions are looking at, what are the trends geographically, technology wise, user behavior wise. So very, very great report, and thank you so much for always publishing these every year.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on. And I can only agree, go to newzoo'a.com, download the reports, and if you're interested to learn more, then just reach out to us.
All right. On that note, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you, Tom, 1,000 times for joining the podcast. Thank you for listening to the whole episode. If you like this podcast, please do leave a comment and share the episode. If you want to access the Deconstructor of Fun community with hundreds of senior games folk, go to our website and apply to the Slack group. And if you want to get notified of all the new content we have coming out every week, do subscribe to the weekly Deconstructor of Fun newsletter. Finally, do remember, we love you guys and we appreciate you guys. Catch you next time.